The Batman is receiving a lot of critical praises for its authenticity of a realistic, gritty version of a film noir style of Batman, and people are really appreciating it for its hardcore PG-13 rating. But there are other people that were slightly underwhelmed, and some of their criticisms was because that the film wasn't really dark enough. So what I'm going to be doing today is create a system and figure out whether or not The Batman is actually a scary movie, and if it is a scary movie, how scary is it? I will go ahead and categorize all of the things that will qualify for a scary movie into 3 brackets. I will analyze each of those brackets and give out specific details on what qualifies for these brackets to work and how it can verify this film to be a scary movie or not be a scary movie. If you enjoy videos like this, be sure to click that subscribe button down below and be sure to notify whenever you want to see a brand new video being uploaded. And be sure to like and share this video if you want to go ahead and support more of this YouTube channel. So let's go ahead and start off with what the first bracket is. And the first bracket is going to be suffering. And what I mean by suffering is how much suffering is endured within the film, because a lot of horror movies really do like to endure either some type of suffering. What qualifies as a scary movie for suffering is how much gore is in there, is anybody being tortured, is there an atmosphere that feels so much dread, and how brutal does the film become? It can revolve with anything that's upon the characters or anything visual, or whether it's pertained towards the narrative. If it works for any of these 4 categories, that's how much we need in order to verify this bracket. So how much gore is in the movie? Well, this is a PG-13 film, so you're not really going to expect a lot of gore in here. There's definitely sprinkles of blood in here, so that can count for something, but in terms of like any real flesh being peeled off or anything grotesque that you usually see within a hammered-in horror film, there's definitely none of that in here. But I will give it a 1 out of 5 just for the sake of a few bits and pieces of blood being shown throughout the film. Now, how much torture is in the movie? Well, this is more of an abstract concept when talking about the word torture, because in terms of torture, there are specific ways that a character can be tortured mentally due to looking at the character arc that they've been through. And there's definitely been a lot of journeys with their characters, like Batman and Catwoman, for example, that have caused them a lot of harm, that are making them change the way they think of the world. And it creates these sequences of events with them where you feel very sorry for them because they're so depressed. So yes, there is definitely a torture within that aspect. Now with the physical construct, there's also torture within that aspect as well when it comes to the villain, the Riddler. He sets up these traps and torture devices. There are specific scenes and shots where the film gets incredibly uncomfortable, and these characters caused by the Riddler have experienced a lot of physical and detrimental pain because of it. So in terms of the torture device, I say that this film, it pretty much gets a solid 5 out of 5 in my eye. Now, what about the concept of dread? Does anything within the atmosphere or the tone of this film give you such a sense of dreariness and fear, or anything that resembles you to have some amount of suffering? And to be honest, yes, it does. It's not just the fact that there's so much crime within the city of Gotham, but it's also because the way the film portrays Batman in the movie. There are a lot of scenes where there are corners of dark shadows and you can't really see him, and he appears and then disappears, and you start to become very uncomfortable because you don't want him right next to you, and whatever is happening right next to you, it's terrible either way. You can't figure out whether or not you should be scared of the criminals that are attacking you or afraid of Batman. So the dread in my eyes definitely gets a 5 out of 5. Now the last one that would definitely help verify this category is, does this film have anything brutal in it? And what I mean by that is, does the film have anything where characters go so far towards the limit where they're being pushed and they're causing to go against their ambitions, or some people are faced with reality and they're just sick and tired of it, that it causes them to go on a wrathful path? And to be honest, yes, our characters kind of go towards that route. The Batman is on the verge of almost giving up on Gotham City. He doesn't know where he's at within his life. He feels a lot more of a shut off from the real world and is focusing primarily on who he is as the Batman. And the same thing can be said with Selina Kyle. There's a story arc that's going on with her life that revolves around a lot of unnecessary pain and conflict within her life, where she's going on the opposite side where Batman doesn't want to go and tries to stray away from. So I think the whole brutalness area definitely gives a whole 5 out of 5 as well. And to combine all of these scores together, you get the whole bracket for suffering a 4 out of 5. Now it's time to go over towards the next category, and that is demons. Demons are more of an artistic type of choice that tend to appear in scary movies as well. Sometimes they're a physical appearance, but at other times they're more of an abstract concept of how we think of ourselves or how we think of the main characters. And to analyze how much this category can be verified is what kind of scary creatures are in here? Is there any amount of psychological evil inside of our main protagonist or inside of the antagonist? And finally, is there some type of spiritual evil that's revolving around the atmosphere? So as for scary creatures, there isn't any. There's no gigantic werewolf, there's no vampire in here, there's no disgusting monster in the movie. There's definitely a person that dresses up as a bat as a costume, but he would technically count as a little bit of a scary creature and people are terrified of him, but that doesn't mean that he actually is a creature. And as for the villains in here, like say the Riddler or the Penguin or even Falcone is not really a creature, he's just a human being. So as for scary creatures, I'm gonna lean into just 1 out of 5 just because there is somebody that is dressed up as a bat and people are scared of him, but he isn't a realistic bat, so can't necessarily give that a 5 out of 5. So any psychological evil that's inside of the characters, there's a lot of that within most of the characters in the film. There's that within Batman, there's that in Catwoman, and there's that within the Riddler, and there's also that kind of psychological evil in one of the other characters named Falcone. This character is actually a lot more involved within all of the other 3 characters that I mentioned, and how much he made all of those other people suffer as well. So I think that like a psychological evil inside of these characters, it definitely goes around to say like it's a solid 5 out of 5. And finally, is there any sort of spiritual evil that is in the atmosphere of the film? And yes and no. By daylight, it's just a regular city that does have some people committing crimes, but by the night, there's definitely a lot more criminals out there. The look of the city is a lot more musk and dirty. Gotham City is kind of a character of itself in how much crime is spread around and how much evil is really there. So a good portion of the film, we do get a lot of dedication towards that city, and it is at night, but to be honest, not all the time at night is it always that evil, and sometimes we are in the daylight where we do have people trying to have a reign of hope. So I'm gonna say that this category gets a 3 out of 5. If you round up all of these scores, the bracket for the demons would calculate towards a 3 out of 5. And we finally move on towards our last bracket, and that is, does the plot revolve around something that is pretty scary? And what I mean by that is, does the story revolve around anything suspenseful or some type of suspenseful situations? Do we see our characters whose personality is to kill have no motivation to stop at all? And are our protagonist characters in traps where they don't have much room to escape at all? This movie is a comic book movie and it does revolve a lot of action, so you can tell that there is definitely going to be a lot of suspenseful or intense moments. But what about any quiet moments where our characters are just having one-on-one conversation and have caused a greater deal of trouble with themselves or other people that they don't want to get hurt? And there's definitely a lot of that in here. Characters almost die left and right. There are other characters that would definitely die, but off screen, there's a lot of pain inflicted upon of other people. There's something that does happen in the film and it requires a limited amount of time. Actually, there are like 3 things that happen in here. Some people make it and some people don't. And there are other situations that you can't really stop and you try to figure out how you can get yourself out of that situation as fast as you can. So for suspenseful situations, it is an absolute 5 out of 5. Now let's move on to the second thing. Are there any characters in here that don't have any motivation to stop what it is that they're doing and to continue on doing their evil deeds? And the answer is yes. There are villains in this film, and all 3 of those villains do have ambitions where they don't want to stop. They want to continue doing the things that pleases them, or they want to go ahead and spread a message to whatever ideology they have and will go to extreme lengths and not stop whatever it is that they want to do. So the fact that we do have at least 3 characters in here, almost 4, that have these ambitions and are thriving on doing these evil deeds, I say that this bracket definitely gets itself a 5 out of 5 as well. And finally, let's go ahead towards the last category. Does this film have any traps where our main character, Batman, doesn't really have much room to escape? There are a couple of scenes where Batman has to wing it and he doesn't know where to go or how to get out of specific places. Now, that does depend on the certain scenarios though, because there are 3 places where he does have to escape specific places, but one of those specific places isn't necessarily within the correct context of what we're talking about here. We're talking about somebody that's wanting to do harm on Batman and he tries to do whatever he can to escape that kind of harm. One is a little bit of an abstraction, so I don't think it would technically count that well as a trap either, because the harm that's being inflicted upon is mostly on something that he would call selfless rather than something that would be inflicted harm upon him. So there's definitely one that's in there, one that could have been there, but it's a little bit hard to defend, and another one that technically doesn't count because it's more of an abstraction. So because there are some technicalities in here, I would say that this rating would give more of a 2.5 out of 5. And to go ahead and calculate all of these numbers and figure out what the score for this bracket is, it would calculate itself up to being a 2.5 out of 3. And combining all three of these fractions and calculating up to a percentage is 70% within the category of being a scary movie. It isn't that scary, it isn't like a terrifying film that you're going to be traumatized by seeing, but with the type of categories that fit within the quality of this film, I see some of them work pretty well and some are not as strong as they should be, while others are kind of non-existent. So I think this film actually does categorize itself enough to be somewhat of a scary film. And there are some things to think in here that pretty much are scary. But what do you guys think of this? Do you think The Batman is a scary film, or do you think it doesn't count itself as that and you think I'm pretty much wrong on this? Put your thoughts down in the comment section below and let's have a conversation about it. And like this video if you agree with what I say, or dislike this video if you disagree with what I say. I don't mind the dislikes. So that is it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be sure to see you in the next video.